This is Land of Havilah, Jeremiah 24. It's 10 verses. Verse 1. Yahweh showed me, and behold, 2 baskets of figs were set before Yahweh's temple, after Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had carried away captive Jeconiah the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the craftsmen and smiths from Jerusalem, and had brought them to Babylon. Comment, let's set the table for this chapter. We'll find out when we read verse 8 that Zedekiah was king at the time of this vision. He was the last king of Jeremiah's ministry, Jeremiah 1:3. So this vision was somewhere between 597 and 586. 597 was the year Nebuchadnezzar set siege the second time. The way your narrator reads the history of it and the way he reads between the lines of it a little bit. During that second siege, there was a coup inside the city against King Jehoiakim. His own people dragged him outside the walls, which in effect delivered him to Nebuchadnezzar, and they coronated his 18-year-old son Jehoiachin. Jehoiachin is his name in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, but in Jeremiah and afterwards in the Bible, he's known as Jeconiah, as Jeremiah just called him in verse 1. After they dethroned his father, young Jeconiah sat on the throne 3 months and decided to surrender. He walked out, gave himself up to Nebuchadnezzar, and surrendered the city. This was a good move because it avoided starvation and a bloodbath. It was as Jeremiah advised in chapter 21, verse 9, where Yahweh said anyone who remained in the city would die, but he who went and passed over to the Babylonians would escape with his life. Yahweh deemed Jeconiah a good fig in verse 1 we just read, at least partly because he listened to Yahweh in that final decision and surrendered. It turned out that Nebuchadnezzar took him to Babylon but treated him with respect. He didn't take him in fetters like he did his father 3 months previously. The young king spent 37 years in prison in Babylon, after which a new king arose in Babylon who let him out, befriended him, supported him, and Jeconiah lived out his life pleasantly, Jeremiah 52, 31-34. When Jeconiah surrendered the city, Nebuchadnezzar also took princes, as we just read in verse 1, which means not just sons of the king, but leading men in general he took, and Nebuchadnezzar took craftsmen and smiths. Other than that, Nebuchadnezzar pretty much left Judah intact. He appointed Zedekiah as king and made Zedekiah swear allegiance to Babylon, which brings us up to the present times in verse 1 that Zedekiah is king during this vision. It was a vision of Yahweh's temple. In front of it were set 2 baskets of figs in verse 1. Going on, verse 2. One basket had very good figs, like the figs that are first ripe, and the other basket had very bad figs, which could not be eaten, they were so bad. Then Yahweh asked me, "What do you see, Jeremiah?" I said, "Figs. The good figs are very good, and the bad are very bad, so the bad can't be eaten." Yahweh's word came to me, saying, "Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, like these good figs, so I'll regard the captives of Judah, whom I've sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans, for good. For I'll set my eyes on them for good, and I'll bring them again to this land. I'll build them and not pull them down. I'll plant them and not pluck them up. I'll give them a heart to know me, that I am Yahweh. They'll be my people, and I'll be their God, for they'll return to me with their whole heart." Comment in verses 2 and 3, the figs in one basket are very good. The figs in the other basket are very bad and cannot be eaten. In verse 5, Yahweh says the basket of good figs represents the captives that have already been sent out of Judah. Since Yahweh delivered this word during the reign of Zedekiah, it puts us in a time frame that the first 2 sieges are already past. At the conclusion of both sieges, Nebuchadnezzar took captives. Daniel and his friends were taken after the first siege, Daniel chapter 1. Young King Jeconiah and the 10,000 princes, smiths, and craftsmen were taken after the second siege. In verse 5, Yahweh calls those first 2 waves of captives good figs. Yahweh ordains a good future for them. He'll plant them and not pluck them up in verse 6. He'll give them a heart to know him in verse 7. They'll return to him with their whole heart in verse 7. The good figs and their posterity will be the basis for Judah's future. Their children and grandchildren will have a chance to return to Judah after 70 years, Jeremiah 29:10. Concerning young King Jeconiah, his personal outcome, as we already said, was that he was in prison in Babylon 37 years, but he was released and lived out his life in royal comfort and honor, Jeremiah 52:31-34. He had sons, 1 Chronicles 3:17 and 18. He was also known as Jeconiah the Captive, Matthew 1:11. His grandson Zerubbabel was key in leading the first wave of Jews back to Judah and reestablishing Judah, 1 Chronicles 3:18 and Ezra 2:2. Zerubbabel's line eventually led to Jesus, Matthew 1:1, so that was a good future indeed for Jeconiah. But who are the bad figs, and what will happen to them? Verse 8. As the bad figs which cannot be eaten, they are so bad. Surely, Yahweh says, so I'll give up Zedekiah the king of Judah and his princes and the remnant of Jerusalem, who remain in this land, and those who dwell in the land of Egypt. I'll even give them up to be tossed back and forth among all the kingdoms of the earth for evil, to be a reproach and a proverb, a taunt and a curse, in all places where I will drive them. I'll send the sword, the famine, and the pestilence among them, until they are consumed from off the land that I gave to them and to their fathers. Comment: at the time of the vision of the figs, Jeconiah and the rest of the good figs were already removed, and Jeremiah was left in Jerusalem. In verse 8, King Zedekiah, who sits on the throne currently, is a bad fig. The rest who remain in Judah are also bad figs. Jeremiah is one exception. Plus those who have escaped to Egypt or who will escape to Egypt are also bad figs. In verse 9, the future of the bad figs is horrendous. They'll be tossed back and forth among the kingdoms of the earth for evil, for a reproach, proverb, taunt, and curse, which means they'll be known for their incredible suffering. Their suffering in verse 10 will include sword, famine, and pestilence. Yahweh will consume them off the promised land. In fulfillment, Zedekiah kept defying Yahweh's word. Jeremiah told him to keep subjecting himself to Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah 27:8-12. But Zedekiah believed the false prophets and rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Of course, this provoked Nebuchadnezzar to come back to Jerusalem and set siege the third time. Zedekiah foolishly held out to the end and let the city starve, thinking by the false prophets that Yahweh would give him victory. When after 19 months of siege the Babylonians finally broke in, it was with fury of the sword and mass captivity of the emaciated survivors. Even after that, according to this prophecy, Yahweh would keep chasing the survivors in whatever land they found themselves captive. Nebuchadnezzar left a tiny group in the land after the third siege, but some of them fled to Egypt where they were consumed, Jeremiah 44. So that was the outcome of this prophecy for the bad figs. Jeremiah 25 is next.